French President Emmanuel Macron will meet Donald Trump in Washington on Monday. This information was confirmed by both the Élysée and the White House. The meeting comes as Western leaders are scrambling to respond to Trump's decision to negotiate directly with Russia, potentially sidelining Kyiv and Europe from the process entirely. Let's take a listen to President Macron's latest statements on this issue on social media.
So what I'm going to do is tell President Trump, you cannot be weak with President Putin. That's not you. It's not who you are, and it's not your style. It's not in your interest either. How will you be credible on China if you're weak on Putin?
With more on this story, we have our Europe editor with us here on set, Armin Georgian. Armin, do you think Trump is likely to be swayed by what Macron is going to tell him on Monday?
Well, the problem is, France is part of the EU, and the Trump administration has made it very clear there will not be any seat at the table for the EU. It says it will include the EU further down the line, but the main sort of bulk of the negotiations is going to happen between the US and the Russian government directly, and then between the US government and the Ukrainian government directly. So the idea that France or the EU is going to suddenly become seen as an equal partner politically by Donald Trump is wishful thinking. Where there might be some convergence, Catalina, is if, and it's a big if, the EU succeeds in doing this big splurge in spending on its own defense. And that is something that Macron also mentioned in this social media Q&A. But it's a big ask to get all the member states on board on that, and particularly to get them on board with the idea of joint borrowing in order to fund what Macron called this massive defense plan.
And Armin, your program, Talking Europe, spoke to the president of the EU Council yesterday. Is he nervous about what's happening, about this sidelining of Europe?
Yeah, we did speak to Antonio Costa, the president of the EU Council. He told us a few things. Firstly, that he and the whole college of European commissioners, so all the European commissioners, plus, of course, its president, Ursula von der Leyen, they're all going to be in Kyiv on Monday, so kind of showing solidarity around the third anniversary of the war. He also said he's having constant discussions with individual member states to see what sort of security guarantees each country might be willing to give. He also said he's not ruling out appointing a special envoy for Ukraine on behalf of the EU. He says that conversations are going on about that. And we also asked him about President Macron's initiative that we saw in that report just now of bringing EU and European and NATO leaders to Paris earlier in the week, because, of course, that was criticized by some EU political figures who said it's inappropriate for Macron to go outside the usual format of an EU summit in Brussels. So here's what Antonio Costa had to say in response to that.
I supported President Macron's initiative because it was very important to get Europeans around the table, as well as those who are not in the EU, for example, the Canadians. Why? Because it's important to know in such a moment whether we can achieve the negotiations we want and whether we can achieve peace. And we need to see how we are going to secure this peace. Because this peace cannot just be a ceasefire. It has to be sustained over time. This means that Ukraine must be given assurances that Russia will not take advantage of a small ceasefire only to come back stronger and try once again.
Just do it fairly short. So, Catalina, a lot of things are still fuzzy, to be honest, on this whole question of peacekeeping troops. Will they be armed or not? Will they be enforcing merely a ceasefire or an actual peace agreement that is signed? A lot of open questions. And, of course, who's going to be in the force? So as part of the broader question of security guarantees, even the first part of that, which is this peacekeeping force or monitoring force, whatever it's going to be, it's still very, very vague at the moment. I didn't get the impression, to be honest, overall from this interview that there's a kind of clear, unified strategic plan beyond continuing support for Ukraine, which is, of course, what EU leaders have been saying for a long time.
Thank you. That was Armin Georgian for us, our Europe editor. Thank you.